In the summer of 2017, when the dust finally settled over Mosul, there was no cheering in the streets. There were no parades, no flags, no music. Only silence broken by the howl of the wind through shattered windows, and the cries of those still searching through rubble for the dead. How does a city die? Once by conquest, and once again by liberation. The Battle of Mosul, lasting nearly 9 months, involving over 100,000 combatants, and resulting in the deaths of more than 12,000 civilians, was the deadliest urban battle since the Second World War. Its scale was epic, its brutality medieval, yet it remains strangely overshadowed in global memory, eclipsed by other headlines, forgotten amid the endless cycle of conflict. And so the question stands, what really happened in Mosul, and how did a war against a terror state become one of the most devastating sieges of the 21st century? To answer that, we must go back to a moment when Iraq was already bleeding, and the black banners of a new nightmare were rising. The story of Mosul's destruction begins years before the first tank rolled through its streets. In 2003, the United States invaded Iraq, toppling Saddam Hussein and dissolving the Ba'athist regime. The aftermath was chaos, a power vacuum filled by insurgents, militias, and warlords. By 2011, as American forces withdrew, Iraq was a fractured state. Its sectarian lines deepened and its military hollowed. That same year, the Arab Spring set the region ablaze. In neighboring Syria, a peaceful protest turned into a brutal civil war. Among the chaos, a group calling itself the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS, emerged from the remnants of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, led by a shadowy figure named Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. The group thrived in the lawless zones between Syria and Iraq, drawing recruits with promises of divine purpose and unchallenged power. Then, in June 2014, the world watched in horror and disbelief as Mosul, Iraq's second largest city, fell to just 1,500 ISIS fighters without a fight. The Iraqi army, outnumbering the invaders 10-1, collapsed and fled. Weapons, tanks, entire military bases surrendered without resistance. ISIS had won its first true city, and Baghdadi walked to the pulpit of Mosul's Grand al-Nuri Mosque to declare a new Islamic caliphate. The message was clear. This was not a movement, it was a state, born in fire and blood. Within months, ISIS controlled territory the size of the United Kingdom across Iraq and Syria. Their rule was not merely oppressive, it was medieval in its cruelty, public executions, slavery, ethnic cleansing, and mass destruction. Mosul became their crown jewel, their de facto capital in Iraq. But as with all empires built on terror, the clock was already ticking. By 2016, the world had changed. ISIS had shocked the globe with its slick propaganda and battlefield victories, but now it faced an enemy. Unlike before, a global coalition of Iraqi forces, Kurdish Peshmerga, Shia militias, Sunni tribesmen, and the United States-led international coalition backed by American air power. This force was not just retaliating, it was preparing for a final offensive. That final battle would begin in October 2016. With a force of 100,000 soldiers encircling Mosul, ISIS had fortified the city with a vast network of tunnels, IEDs, suicide bombers, and sniper nests. But they also had something more sinister: civilians. Mosul still housed over 1 million people, many of them used as human shields. The assault began from 3 directions, with Kurdish forces advancing from the east and north, while the Iraqi army and allied militias approached from the south. At first, It seemed shockingly effective. Dozens of villages were liberated in the first 48 hours. But Mosul was not Fallujah. It was not Tikrit. It was not one stronghold among many. It was the symbol of the caliphate. And ISIS would die before letting it go. Suicide attacks, oil fires, snipers disguised as civilians, the advance quickly slowed to a crawl. Every neighborhood was a death trap. And yet, the coalition pressed on, driven not only by strategy, but by vengeance. By November, the elite Golden Division, Iraq's best trained special forces, began urban clearance operations in eastern Mosul. By January 2017, they had taken the eastern half of the city, but now came the real nightmare. The old city, on the western bank of the Tigris, was where the fight would truly descend into the inferno. The streets were too narrow for tanks, the buildings too ancient, too sacred, or too rigged with explosives to bomb freely. And every building, every alley, every corpse might be a trap. February 2017. The Iraqi flag flew once again over the eastern half of Mosul, but across the Tigris River, behind shattered bridges and crumbling walls, western Mosul stood grim, silent, and prepared for the final stand. Here was the old city, centuries old, sacred ground, now turned into a fortress of despair. ISIS had concentrated its most fanatical fighters here. Foreign volunteers, suicide bombers, child soldiers. There would be no surrender. On the 19th of February, the offensive resumed. Iraqi forces stormed Mosul International Airport, wresting it from ISIS control in less than a week. It was a symbolic victory, not just strategic, but psychological. The coalition had taken the city's front gate, and then came the push into the ancient streets themselves. This wasn't war, it was hell. House by house, ISIS had turned homes into bunkers, schools into ammo depots, hospitals into traps. They burned tires to blind drones. They used families as shields, children as bait, and women as suicide bombers. There was no line between fighter and non-combatant. The city itself had become the weapon, and yet the coalition pressed forward. By early March, they had taken the Nineveh Governorate complex, the Mosul Museum, and even ISIS's main judicial court, but the cost was staggering. Every building cleared meant dozens of lives lost. And for the people of Mosul caught between airstrikes and executions, nowhere was safe. The United Nations estimated that by mid-March, nearly 500,000 civilians had fled, and still, hundreds of thousands remained trapped, terrified, and forgotten. To the world, the map was turning blue. To those inside the city, it was just turning red. The final weeks of the battle were some of the most horrific urban warfare seen in generations. The old city became a maze of smoke, screams, and shadows. ISIS blew up the Al-Nuri Mosque, the same mosque where al-Baghdadi had declared the caliphate. They claimed the Americans had done it, but the rubble told another story. Charges placed from within. It was a symbolic suicide. The dream of the caliphate born in Mosul would die in Mosul. By the 10th of July, 2017, the Iraqi government declared victory. The black flag had fallen, but even as Baghdad celebrated, the guns had not yet gone silent. Pockets of resistance continued fighting for 2 more weeks, and when it was truly over, and the final ISIS fighter had been dragged from his hiding place or buried beneath a crumbling ceiling, the full scale of the devastation came into focus. The battle had lasted 266 days. 10,000 ISIS fighters had died. Over 6,000 Iraqi and Kurdish troops had become casualties. And the true cost, the human cost, was 12,000 civilians dead, many more wounded, orphaned, or disappeared. Entire neighborhoods were erased. Mosul, once a city of over 2 million, lay silent. Its ancient libraries burned, its markets flattened, its history buried beneath concrete. And though the caliphate's grip had been broken, its shadow remained. The Battle of Mosul was, in many ways, the end of ISIS as a state, deprived of its crown jewel, cut off from its networks, and hounded across desert frontiers. The so-called Islamic State would never again hold territory on that scale. But did the war really end? Even after liberation, Mosul streets remained lined with explosives. Its people returned home to rubble and ruin, their homes marked with death, their memories shattered. The international community promised aid, but it came slow. Rebuilding began, yet suspicion lingered. For many Sunni Iraqis, trust in the central government had collapsed alongside their homes. Sectarian wounds never healed after the U.S. invasion had been ripped open once again. And for the young, for a generation who had grown up under bombs, banners, and black flags, the scars are deeper than rubble. ISIS may be gone, but the conditions that created it, unemployment, corruption, sectarianism, foreign intervention, those remain. Just as Berlin and Stalingrad once symbolized the collapse of one world order and the birth of another, Mosul stands as a warning that victory on the battlefield does not mean peace, that defeating an army does not erase an idea, and that a city can be liberated and still be lost. Today, if you walk through Mosul, you will still hear silence in the broken windows. You might hear a call to prayer, rising over twisted rebar, or the clang of a shovel, digging up the last remains of someone long missing. Children play where bombs once fell. A school reopens beside a crater, and somewhere, beneath the debris of collapsed centuries, the ghost of the caliphate still lingers. Mosul is not just a name on a map. It is a scar on Iraq, on the world, and on the very idea that war can end cleanly. So the question remains, if a city can fall twice, once to terror, once to liberation, can it ever truly rise again? Or is Mosul, the city that died 3 times,